What is the biggest lie that parents tell their kids? I wasn't allowed to go outside because of debauchers and kidnappers. I was 17 before I was allowed to do it by myself. Doesn't include sneaking out. It's okay, as a teenager I was often sneaking out due to unreasonable curfews. My mother flipped out and tried to cancel my train tickets to NYC and plane tickets to Laos when she found out I was going. I'm 23 and had just gotten back from a deployment. Grades were a huge point of contention in my family because my parents were convinced I was some super genius. I was always grounded for B's no matter what. No matter how much I had studied, no matter what the class average was, no matter what the teacher said, because I was capable of more. There were some instances where I'd even be grounded for not getting a perfect score. 98/100? Klondike, but we're disappointed in you because we know you can do better. You're grounded for a week so you can use the time to improve your grades. This isn't really an example of overprotection, but these were ultra hover parents who would never let me do anything on my own because they were convinced I was going to find a way to kill myself. This was just my worst experience with them. I don't know about the worst, but our entertainment was so censored that we had to fast forward through the Poor Unfortunate Souls song in The Little Mermaid because it was about witchcraft and sorcery. Wait, this might actually qualify as one of the worst things, because it meant I wasn't allowed to read the Harry Potter books growing up. I was 10 when the first book came out. That would have been freaking magical. I feel like you might be one of my cousins. This happened to a friend of mine. Me and a group of friends went to see a movie. My friend was on one end of the row and her mom was on the other end. An adult scene came on and her mom started yelling the girl's full name across the theater for her to close her eyes. That is downright traumatizing. Reading this thread just brought up two separate instances from back when I worked at a local park. Most of the day we worked inside a nature center that had tanks with local animals in them. Other times we would clean up the park, teach programs, birthday parties, or help with camps. Incident 1. This lady came in with two little kids between around 5-10. Every time they tried to look at one of the animals, she would freak out and physically drag them away from the tank, saying, "Don't get too close. You'll get germs." I can't fathom what kept her in there for the 10 minutes she was there, since basically the only things there were tanks of animals. Incident 2. I never got too involved with the camps, but my supervisor was a major part of them. She came in one day after sending the kids home and looked like she was about to cry. I asked her what happened, and she said that one of the dads spent almost 15 minutes saying goodbye to his kid in this huge overly emotional display that basically scared the kid into crying for 15 minutes after the dad left. And then the dad came back to make sure his kid was okay, and then spent 15 minutes saying goodbye again, and then the kid cried. This cycle repeated throughout the entire day, to the point where the dad was following them on hikes to make sure his kid was okay. Basically, as long as the kid was away from his parents, he was never allowed a minute to relax and actually enjoy himself. That's horrible. As a parent, it's hard to leave your kid, but you just have to. I will be forever grateful to one of my daughter's preschool teachers, who used to call me, unsolicited, 15 minutes after I dropped my daughter off, to say, "Don't worry, she stopped crying as soon as you were out the door." Homeschooled by super strict religious parents. Internet was evil, largely because my mother didn't know how it worked. We had it for research. Computer was always in the middle of the house in full view. Most popular computer games were evil too, since they involved killing, magic, aggression. MMORPGs especially, though later in my teen years they became my main human interaction. Banned from the computer for a week for speaking to people on MSN that my parents didn't know personally. No sleepovers, parties, association with anyone from outside the church without my parents around. Period. Once I was in my teens and had my license, if I was ever somewhere I hadn't said I was going, I would have to explain exactly why and what I was doing. Ran away from home before turned 18. Didn't speak to my mother for months. We're on fairly good terms now and speak every few weeks, but to this day I make sure she never catches me doing something she doesn't approve of. My parents weren't religious, but were the exact same regarding the internet. My mom would sit and watch what we were doing every time my sister and I would go on the internet. Weren't allowed to have MSN or even a Hotmail. Of course I had to sneak it. Your experience was definitely way worse. I'm glad things are better now with your parents. I was this kid in high school, he is 16 years old but is forced to go to sleep at 9 PM every day and about 10 PM in the weekends, instead of getting money for doing work for his parents. I didn't get any allowance. I wasn't allowed to get my driver's license. I received a national merit scholarship and the only schools I was allowed to apply to were the military academies. As a virgin female in the early 80s, that just wasn't going to work for me. I wasn't allowed to go on dates. I wasn't allowed to give out my phone number. My school published a directory with phone numbers and addresses. When someone from school would call me, my stepfather would hang up on them and spend the next several hours screaming at me for having the nerve to have a person call me. I wasn't allowed to go to movies with my friends. I got in trouble for using more than 4 squares of toilet paper when I went to the restroom. I wasn't allowed to use tampons, and if I used more than 1 pad per day on my period, I was punished. I got in trouble for drinking milk. I got in trouble for listening to the radio. Classical music helps me fall asleep. Moved out as soon as I graduated high school. Best decision ever. About 20 years later, my stepfather apologized to me for his behavior. Well, me and my brother are 17 and 18, respectively, and don't know how to drive. My dad refuses to teach us because he thinks we'll leave. We're not allowed to go to the movies, bowling, or anything fun for that matter. This I have no idea why. I feel like my teenage years have gone to waste. My curfews were ridiculous and I was always grounded for getting smart with my mother. I snuck out a few times, got caught every time because my mother would check up on me multiple times a night. But I'm pretty sure one of the worst experiences was when I snuck out of the house and she somehow found out where I was. High school championship sports game. Showed up there in her pajamas and slippers with her makeup running and a psychotic smile on her face and dragged me out of there in front of my classmates. It was just painfully embarrassing. For a long time, I was known as the girl with the mom who would find out about parties and call other parents about it. It was pretty terrible. I'm sorry, the curfews must have been really early then. When I was younger, I was allowed to go out but my parents would spring surprise visits to wherever I was to check that I was there. B. I was behaving. However, it did get really bad to one point where, when my parents went out, my mum would double bolt all the doors in the hours. The windows were also barred, to make sure I didn't leave the house. I was never allowed to close my bedroom door, and if I was on the computer when my mum came into the room, I had to open up all my browsers and chat boxes and let her read everything I was looking at and had written. My mum would go through all my things. I had a diary which was hidden in a locked drawer. One time my mum called me, picked me up and pulled out the diary. She was livid about some of the stuff I'd written. How I was depressed etc. So she drove me to an abandoned car park and proceeded to beat the crap out of me. Then threatened to ship me back to Singapore if I ever told my dad what she had done. Oh, also, she would regularly go through the home phone bill and suss out any suspicious calls. One time, there was a really expensive call and she was convinced I'd made it, even though I hadn't, and started screaming that I was a liar. She made me call up the number, whilst standing over me. It turned out to be a business partner of my dad's from overseas. The moment he answered, she told me to hang up and just walked out of the room. When she found out I'd called the kids helpline, it's like this free line where kids can call to say if they're being abused or they're depressed. She started screaming saying I had no right to say anything to an outsider and then beat me again. I forgot to mention that after reading my diary, my mum made me tear it into strips and deposit pieces in different bins in different locations so no one would ever know what I'd written. I'm not even scratching the surface of stuff she used to do. I used to get called a SW and freaking idiot if I came second or third in class instead of first. That's not overprotective, just abusive. Sorry you had to go through that. I got yelled at and spanked. Bordered on beating. Really, it was with a gigantic leather belt that left bruises. For the dumbest crap, I discovered Yahoo's music section late in middle school and used it to listen to the top 40 station while I did homework. The songs that occasionally came on got me hurt so badly I couldn't sit again for a few hours just because they were, in my dad's opinion, crappy music, and he didn't approve of me listening to that kind of trash. Who Let the Dogs Out ended in the worst one by far. Although mine is not as bad, my mom once refused to let me go to an R&B concert with my friends. They paid for my ticket because the black people might riot. What the heck? They wouldn't let me use a digital camera until I was 16 or 17. They were afraid I would break anything I touched. Originally, when there was computer trouble, it was automatically my fault. When I finally saved money to buy my own computer, my mother proceeded to fry their hard drive 6 more times, which required a $60 warranty replacement each time. Nobody heaped crap on me again after that. The parents of a dude my friends used to hang with took him to the ER and had his stomach pumped after drinking 5 beers. He was 21, mind you. My best friend has an overprotective dad that I despise. He wouldn't let her be on the cross-country team because usually practice ends at 6, and he didn't want her being out that late to just mingle with guys. Thing is, coach really wanted her on the varsity team because she has great stamina. Once she was using her laptop to type an essay, here comes her dad, slams the laptop shut, breaking the screen. He didn't want her fricking around online with men. She recently told me she wouldn't be able to attend formal or prom for her senior year. Her dad won't let her. I had a friend in high school with very overprotective parents. No music, no TV, etc. When he'd come over, he was always glued to the TV. I'm sure there is a lot more to the story of what went on behind closed doors, but soon after high school, he got married and pretty much cut all ties with his family. Sad really, but I've recently heard from him, and he seems quite happy, with well-adjusted children of his own. I have a friend in school who has some seriously strict parents. He is 16 years old but is forced to go to sleep at 9 PM every day and about 10 PM in the weekends. Instead of getting money for doing work for his parents, he gets bags of marbles. I can't help but to feel sorry for him because he's not very good socially and his parents are hurting him more than actually helping him. They are also very strict about his school grades, but his personality will probably make it hard for him to live on his own if he decides to move out. He gets bags of marbles. What? My parents are very conservative, but we never had any issues when I lived at home. My best friend in junior high school, however, had an extremely controlling stepdad. He was convinced that she would be late for everything if she didn't wear her watch 24/7. But she would be grounded for a week for every time he caught her not wearing it. One Sunday morning at church she realized she had forgotten her watch. I was wearing one, so I let her borrow mine. He grounded her for 2 weeks for being deceitful. He also required any boy who wanted to date her to ask his permission in person. Despite the fact that he was not her father and her father was an active presence in her life, despite living several states over, that caused a lot of tension. One other thing I can think of is his insistence on her eating something from each food group at lunch. At our school, preschool and elementary age children could get a tray of food with a few different items for $2. For anyone older, you would have to buy each item separately, ranging from $1 to $2 each. Don't know what the reasoning was being this. Most people would just buy chicken tenders, or a baked potato, or another single item. You rarely saw anyone buy more than 1 or 2 things. Every day, he would give her $5 to get through break between 3rd and 4th period. We would go into the cafeteria and get a snack and lunch, but would be and ground her if she didn't get the full plate, even though it wasn't available. Thankfully her mom wised up and kicked the guy out after the tension between him and her eldest daughter got so strong that the girl moved across the country to live with her dad. Whoa. I asked for Legos for Christmas. I was told I could not have them because I might try to make them into the shape of a gun. My mom didn't let us have water guns because they were shaped like guns. I was faced gender-based harassment at my first job when I was 16. My parents told me it was my fault and I was grounded until I was legally an adult. 18. I was not allowed to go anywhere by myself. I could go in our yard and eventually walk to the post office. I was only allowed on the internet for an hour a day, and they had all my passwords, and I was required to talk on the phone with one of my parents in the room. I was also homeschooled, so I did not see any of my friends for those 2 years. We also moved in the middle, so I just didn't have any friends after that. Whoa, that's awful. I can't believe parents could think it was their child's fault for facing gender-based harassment at work. especially when they're underage. I lived in a town that had a busy road running through it. It was a 4-lane highway with a speed limit of 35 miles per hour with designated crosswalks and stoplights. Nothing serious. My friend wasn't allowed to cross the highway until he was 17 when he decided to just say frick it. Oh, and to add, once he graduated he got into hardcore drugs and became an alcoholic. If you hover over your kids for their whole lives, they will take their freedom pretty serious. My friend wasn't allowed to cross the highway until he was 17 when he decided to just say frick it and was promptly run over. My freshman year of college, I didn't call home for about a week and a half. My mother called campus police and had them track me down, and in the middle of class they handed me a phone with her waiting on the line. I'm 16 and can't hang out with anyone outside of school. I can't go to the mall. I'm not even allowed to leave my house unless I'm with my grandma. I never get to stay home alone. I don't even have my learner's permit, and I live with my grandparents and have since I was a baby because my dad is in jail for murdering my mum. Whoa, I just wish that everything gets better for you as you get older. I'm sorry. My friend in high school was very Catholic and her parents were even more religious than her. We went to a friend's birthday party and it was a big dance bash. She was a bit of a lush and got really drunk and was sandwiched between two guys grabbing one's butt. Someone took a ton of pictures of her with different guys, bent over dancing, you know, the whole shabam. The next day she woke up to her phone and computer missing and the pictures of her dancing printed on 8x11 paper with Bible verses on them. Her parents shamed her. The pictures lined the hallway from her room all the way down the stairs. I think she still lives at home now and she's 24. Bloody heck. I was ill the other day and told my parents the day before I probably wasn't going to go to work. Woke up the next day, after having woken early to tell my boss I wouldn't be in, to find 3 missed calls, 6 texts and a voicemail from my dad. It transpired he had tried to call in sick for me. I am 23 years old and live 2 hours away from him. I worked at a Papagino's pizzeria when I was 16. My father lives 1,300 miles away in Florida and has emotional issues. One day when I was working, he called Papagino's demanding to speak with me. Fortunately, my co-worker Mike answered the phone, realized what was going on, and made the command decision to tell my father I wasn't there. He was a good friend for the few months I knew him. Was grounded for a whole year for being a few minutes late. Didn't want me going to my best friend's house because her mom was gay and didn't want me to pick it up, I guess. I'm so sorry. Some parents need to learn to parent right. If it was a crime to not, they would get a life sentence. One of my brother's best friends wasn't allowed to come over anymore after he broke his arm on our trampoline. Now when I say on the trampoline, I don't mean he was jumping on it. He was sprinting toward it, slipped in the wet grass and he landed with his arm in front of him and the first thing it contacted was the metal tube rim of the trampoline, and his arm broke. My brother called his parents to come get him because he was hurt. When they got there, the mom went off on my parents for being irresponsible and how unsafe it was to have a trampoline and was talking about a lawsuit. Once she found out how it happened, she shut up and got embarrassed. Later the dad came and apologized for the wife and gave us a bottle of wine, but he wasn't allowed to play at our house anymore. A bit ridiculous if you ask me. My mom taught me to drive. It was traumatic. It has to be absolutely perfect. Speed, position, mirrors, not even a millimeter off. If the speedometer went down or up as much as 1 mile per hour while I was driving, she would scream in my ear, speed up or slow down. God forbid there was a red light a mile ahead. She would flip her crap and demand that I stop right then and there. I hate driving for this very reason. I'm a ball of nerves every time I'm behind the wheel. I refuse to drive anywhere myself because I'm afraid I'll have a massive panic attack. God forbid there was a red light a mile ahead. She would flip her crap and demand that I stop right then and there. You should have actually stopped and caused her to slam into the dashboard. Worst experience was that I failed to close the sliding screen door one day and the dog chewed a hole in it. Got belted, spanked with a belt, with a big police belt. Getting put in restriction aka grounded was pretty commonplace all the way up through my senior year of high school. Long term, though, plenty of psychological aftermath. I wasn't used to making my own decisions and we never talked about money. To this day, I have no idea what kind of salary my parents made. As a result, when I left to go to college, I didn't know how to manage credit cards or pay bills and I had zero discipline for myself to study and go to class. You can imagine where that road leads. Flip side to belting, I was the stepson. My sister, his blood daughter, failed a year of school and had to repeat it. They got her a Nintendo so she'd have something to do that summer. When I was growing up we had a place where the bathroom was separate from the living and bedroom and you basically had to walk outside to enter the other house where bathroom was. From when I was 10 and my brother 12 till I was 13 and him 16 my mom locked my brother and me in the living house every time she got off to work and left her bucket for us to crap and pee in because she didn't want us going outside while she was away. She was a really controlling person, as in you can't do anything without me knowing and approve. That's not controlling. That's some pretty severe neglect. In HS, I had a female friend with a raspy voice. She came to stay for a weekend at my parents' house and we basically spent the entire time in the pool. Friend ended up getting a horse throat and we decided to shower, get dressed and head out for brunch. My dad comes home on his lunch break during this time. Here's friend and I talking through my bedroom door while we're getting dressed and yells for me to open the door immediately. When I reply with an undoubtedly bratty no, we're naked my dad, thinking friend was a boy due to her voice, proceeded to break my door in half using only his body. Yeah, that's how serious our home's no boys in bedrooms rule was. I was a freshman in HS, only had like 3 friends and one of them had a birthday party, no adults. I got there and my parents picked me up an hour later. The party hadn't even started by the time they forced me out. I cried all night. The rest of HS I was too awkward to make friends so that was perfect for my parents. Everything has changed now so I'm happy. My mom decided I couldn't spend the night at my best friend's house in 6th grade because his dad owned a gun. Note that my parents are not anti-gun hippie types. In fact they are quite conservative. The reason why was because my mom read an article about kids playing Russian roulette. When she told me that I talked to my friend and we were both like why the heck would we play Russian roulette? That could kill us. What's the point of that? We'd rather play Super Nintendo plus my friend's dad would have beat his butt if he even touched the gun. But that wasn't enough for my mom. Did I mention that I had spent the night over there before once without incident? But once she found out there was a gun in the house, that suddenly made it dangerous. I could still go over there during the day, but couldn't spend the night there. I could understand the reasoning if the gun was left lying around everywhere, fully loaded and cocked, but it sounds as if there was a strict gun control. Beating your friends but if he touched it, and your mother was way overprotective. I used to have to ask 2 weeks in advance to spend time with friends, with a 3-hour maximum hangout period. The caveat was that in that 2 weeks, the house had to be kept spotless. Usually when the hangout day came, my stepdad would say that he could tell I was lying about what my plans were and would make me cancel and then ground me for 2 weeks, thus keeping the house sparkly clean with me trapped inside for a whole month. This went on until I turned 18 and moved out 2 weeks after my birthday. What the crap? I was never allowed to spend the night at friends' homes or go to camps. Going to a small school, this made it hard to have friends. I've ended up with a case of social anxiety that I absolutely hate. Don't get me wrong, I have absolutely wonderful parents who let me do tons of awesome stuff, but I just wish I wasn't held back as much socially. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.